to your question. So, if you don't know it, yay, it's working. Keyframe rate too low. Recommend keyframe rates in the range of, well, my experience, they're going to get a lower quality stream. So, whatever. Yeah, so there we go. Alright, so if we're lucky, it'll let us get away with it anyway. Yeah, and so, yep, you may not get the perfect thing because we're sitting here in the middle of woods somewhere in the Hillsbough, well, I don't know, where are we? Hillsbough River Basin. Yes, part of Hillsbough River State Park. Oh, yeah, there's a little delay on there. And so we're lucky to get a hot spot. But I wanted to keep with tradition, and even though it's Turkey Day weekend, I'm hoping everybody jumps on here. And if you don't know it, you can catch the recording, assuming one shows up. You can catch the recording on our YouTube channel and see all of the past episodes from at least the last 2 years. And if you don't know it, we're going to get started right at 6 o'clock. Yay, somebody's on here. So feel free to let us know who you are. We'll get started here in about 8 minutes. And post any questions you may have. And I've got a few in the queue already. And I know it's dark out here, so I'm trying to keep myself illuminated. There may be a little delay on things. Yes, Facebook is yelling at me for a variety of reasons, but mostly because our connection's kind of sucky. It was doing pretty good, so hopefully the hamsters start working. Maybe we could harness a mosquito and make them flap their wings a little better, because there's no shortage of mosquitoes out here. We were sure it was going to be this chilly weekend, and as it turned out, it was lovely, but kind of warm out, and we are camping in a new spot here that I've never been before, that is a big swamp. It's a beautiful swamp, and we walked around it for 4 hours today, tromping through what was probably foolish in lots of swampy water, where I'm sure there was an endless supply of water moccasins and alligators and other things with fangs and teeth and claws and such. So we'll get started here in just a few more minutes. So if you log on, grab a cup of tea and post your questions, and we'll get started here in just a moment. Are you able to hear or see? Uh-oh. Okay, I know I have. I have Gray here assisting me this evening. So if she's able to get on, that means the rest of us are. So ooh, look. Oh, I don't know if you can. It's an HG cup out in the woods with me. There we go. Showing off that HG mug. If you don't know it, that's the American Herbalist Guild, which everyone who's on here listening to this should be a member. You can be a student member, you can be a regular member, you can be a professional member. There's lots of different ways to get there. Maybe we'll I'm going to put that on the list. I don't talk about AHG enough. Actually, I probably talk about it tons, but that's okay. All right, where is everybody? Don't you want to escape from all of the people staying at your house from last night? It looks like our rate is improving. Look, I got all these stats I can look at. Ba, ba, ba. Any success?
I'm on now. It's delayed, like where.
Okay. Oh, I see that you're on.
I think it's coming in about this weekend.
Okay, cool. Awesome sauce.
Looks good.
All right. So it doesn't look too shaky or anything. I'm sure it's fuzzy.
It's a little fuzzy, but it's not bad.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's yelling at me again. Low FPS. I don't even know what that stands for. Frames per second.
Yeah, possibly.
Oh, I just keep deleting it. I don't care. Hopefully we get a few folks on here this evening. You never know, on the holiday weekends, this may determine whether or not I do this over the winter solstice, Christmas, Hanukkah holiday or not. I'm not sure where it all falls, but I know it's a difficult time. I figured people would be home bored tonight, so although it is Black Friday, so that we can consume twice as much stuff as we normally do. We'll get started here in a few more minutes. Let me get it so I can actually see if anybody's jumped on. If nobody jumps on, we may make it a short one. Teach you all not to participate. Now, if you're just wandering on, we're going to get started in just 4 minutes. Feel free to let us know who you are, where you're from, and post your questions in here. Somehow that is a doable thing, and I will babble incoherently for 2 hours, or as long as you'll all tolerate me. Are you able to see the chat? Okay, cool. I'm never sure what it looks like from the other side. I've never actually done this for somebody else, or with somebody else.
Just the years so far, that's all that's there.
Yeah, that should be all that's there is me. And if all of a sudden you see me lift out of the screen, that's going to mean that the mosquitoes were released and they've carried me away into the jungle, or the swamp yeti has devoured me.
I will say you're freezing on occasion.
Yeah, that's all right. Hopefully, like, the more I worked with it before, the better it got. So maybe we'll luck out with that again. Oh, people showed up. Yay! Howdy all. Thanksgiving was good. I did it early with Gray and her family, and True Turkey Day, we bolted and came out to the woods. So it was good. Hopefully you had a lovely Thanksgiving up there, Kristen. Oh, we got at least 2 other people on here. Yay, we'll get started here in just a minute. Hey, Pickles. People are getting smart. They're showing up right at 6 o'clock before I start babbling, so they don't sit there bored to tears. There will be pauses and stalls in all of this. Hopefully it records nicely, but we are in the middle of the woods, and I'm just working off a hot spot in the middle of a Hillsbough River Basin area. So it is, Facebook is yelling at me for my slow frame rate or keyframe rate or something that keeps popping up, and I'm ignoring it. So bear with the technical difficulties. Anybody's got any questions? Kristen, I got yours. I think I got them all in the queue. Anybody else got some questions? Feel free to post them, and I will do my best to babble through them. I feel like I want to be over by the fire and let everybody share in our campfire. So funny, we were prepared for it to be like freezing cold out here in the low 60s, and I don't think it got below 70. And of course that has brought out the volumes of mosquitoes that may carry me away here in the middle of all of this. So if all of a sudden I cut out, you'll know it's the swamp yetis that followed us back from the trail, or the mosquitoes have finally carted me away. I've decided that just being eaten alive by mosquitoes is how I'm going to treat my hemochromatosis. And it's just let the mosquitoes drain me rather than the blood bank. I see there's a couple more people jumping on. If you got any questions, feel free to post them. Oh, and look at that. It's 6 o'clock. So you'll have to pardon me. I'm sitting on a picnic table that has a warped seat. So I'm literally sitting at an angle here and trying to hold myself up straight without falling over. So if you're just joining us for the first time, I'm Bob Linde in St. Petersburg, Florida, from the Tradition School of Herbal Studies, and this is the oh so exciting Herbalist Oprah Forum. So it's an opportunity for any and all of you to ask questions about anything from Western to Chinese herbal medicine to Florida bioregionalism to you name it. I'm happy to babble about it. And if you miss part of the recording or it becomes garbled because we're on a hot spot, you can catch this and all of our other exciting episodes on our YouTube channel for Tradition School of Herbal Studies. I think we've been doing this for 2 years. I think we've been doing this for about 2 years now. And this came out of COVID that I was not finding. I was finding it really challenging not to connect with the community, both because all of our conferences got canceled from COVID, but also a lot of our all of our free classes we stopped doing, and so the opportunity to try to reconnect with our community during COVID really this ended up being a great way to do it. And it was such a good turnout. I had so many good positive comments. I was like, you know what? Screw it. COVID's over. The conferences are back in action. And, yeah. Um, uh, like, let's just keep doing it until I get tired of it. So one of these days, I'm sure I'll stop. But so long as people keep showing up, I'm going to keep babbling on the last Friday of every month. Bonus if you send in your questions ahead of time, so I can Google it. No, I'm just kidding. So I can think about my answers a little bit more than off the cuff. But for those of you who know me or have been here before, you know I just babble on until I turn blue in the face. Hey, Tiffany, Straggles and ashwagandha. I gotta try to. Hey, Stephanie. Some folks say not to use one or both of them in acute illness. Oh yeah, others say it's fine. Okay, awesome. Um, I'm going to start with that one because that's something we have in a couple of the other questions we've addressed, but I'm still going to get to them, and I've got yours, Kristen, so fret not. But I think that's a great one, Tiffany, to start with. So, in Chinese medicine and acupuncture school, we're always told whatever you do, never nourish when somebody's acutely sick. So if you catch a cold, the flu, whatever, we never want to tonify. And that was beaten into our head. And then the more you look at the herb book, you'll find that the Chinese break that rule all the frickin' time. And if the pattern justifies it, it's super appropriate. I will say that there is research that supports using especially astragalus, and I'm going to come to ashwagandha because those are two very different animals. And Gray, feel free to chime in on the ashwagandha while you're sick part. Um, so astragalus is commonly used in a formula called jade windscreen yu ping fen song. Yu ping feng san. Oops, not an. San. Let's try that again. So that's jade windscreen. And so that's a combination of fang feng, astragalus huang qi, and tractalodes baiju. And that is used to strengthen the exterior, to prevention of colds and flu when you catching more than your fair share of colds and flu, when you have easy or spontaneous sweating. That's a formula we use all the time. And so the thought process is, in Chinese medicine in particular, although we see this cross-culturally, this is not unique to the Chinese. Ayurvedic says this. Most native cultures, Central and South America, North America, have this idea. Hey, Maureen. The idea that disease comes has a climactic, i.e., a weather-related aspect. That in the Chinese we say disease travels on the wind, and that is different from germ theory. So germ theory is a thing, it's real, we have bacteria, viruses, and funguses, but that doesn't explain all the diseases and why we catch cold. And I always like to say, your mama told you not to go outside in a wet head when it's cold out or you'll catch a death of cold. Why do we call it a cold anyway? Why don't we call it a heat, especially when you get a fever? So this idea of disease traveling on the wind and our immune system, in Chinese we call it the Wei Qi, protects against that exterior attack. And it's like, I always like to say the idea of when there's a virus going around an office, 2/3 of the people get sick and a third don't. And the other third is not doing anything different. So why aren't they getting sick? And we say their immune system's stronger, or they have an innate immune system. In Chinese medicine, we would say that their Wei Qi is strong. And it is super appropriate to strengthen that exterior when you're actively sick if you are deficient. I'm sorry, I'm like, how do I phrase this properly? The concern is that we trap the pathogen in and we're not able to push it out. And so we find that for somebody who's very deficient, who gets sick frequently, I find that your qi tonics, astragalus, Huang Qi being one of your qi tonics, very safe and does not extend the length of the disease, despite what all of the books say. What I do caution against is things that are yin tonics, that are cooling, moistening, nourishing herbs. Those used incorrectly are more likely to maybe not trap the pathogen in, but cause a bigger problem of extending the length of the illness. And so I'm cautious on the more moistening, nourishing things like Romania, Mai Mendong, Tien Mendong, which would be Shatavari in Ayurvedic. Ashwagandha, I have not used that at the same time as a cold and flu. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have our Ayurvedic teacher here, so I'm going to defer to her on that. On why would you stop doing ashwagandha during an active infection?
I would not necessarily. I think it has some benefits because it is both calming of the nervous system and supportive of the immune system in some ways, and it's a rather intuitive herb to kind of know if it needs to bring things up or needs to calm things down. And I feel like because of that capacity that obviously you have to play with your own body and see how it responds, but I don't see any contraindications from my studies of it.
And I always put a caution on ashwagandha because it is in so many of our stress formulas, our adrenal adaptogen formulas, that it is a nightshade. If you ever grow it, you'll have that classic paper covering over the fruit. And for folks who have sensitivities to peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, tobacco, all of those are nightshades. Goji berries are another nightshade. To be careful with that.
I'll also say that I was taught that ashwagandha is meant to be used in times of need, so times of high stress, times when you need an adaptogen to support whatever's going on in your life, but it's not to be meant to be used on and on, just another supplement that you take.
Oh, not
my little.
Now I'm going to get on a
cents.
rant because gummies are all the rage. I think gummies are silly.
The only benefit is that they make you more
Yes.
compliant.
There is that, and some people end up using them as candy, so they're overly compliant. And something that's good for you, more does not necessarily make better. It was so funny. I was at the Medicines of the Earth conference, and Gaia Herbs, and I have the utmost respect for the company Gaia Herbs. I think their products are phenomenal. I personally take them for a variety of issues. And they didn't know who I was. Some of the people knew who I was, but this one woman who was working the table, and she was doing her job. They're there as salespeople and trying to get us to buy their product and set up wholesale accounts. And I was very familiar. I've been to their farm. I've been to their factory. I talk of good things about them all the time. And she was like, "Have you tried our new gummies?" And it was something like elderberry gummies. And I was like, "I am offended by your gummies." And she was taken aback. And the reality is, it's a convenient way to get medicine into people, but I feel like it is partly dumbing down our medicine. It's frequently got very low quality herbs in it, and the dosing tends to be extremely low in a lot of those gummies. So there tends to be taking it inappropriately. I would rather a tincture or a glycerin, or ideally either powdered and taken or done as a tea or decoction. So That's and I have nothing to base that on other than I've never seen anything good come of a gummy, except maybe THC. But even then, I don't think it's that good. I'd rather you did a brownie. So, I'm horribly opinionated about it. I think the medicine's supposed to taste crappy sometimes. It's funny. One of the practitioners, when I first opened the clinic 20 something years ago, her little kid actually asks for tincture of echinacea at like 6 months old. And sorry, I'm killing mosquitoes as I'm talking to you all. And it was just about how they were introduced to it. And most of us have been introduced in all the wrong ways to herbal medicine, to like, it tastes yucky, it's scary, hold them down. And instead of being offered this special treat to make them feel so much better. And so sometimes I'm like, nope. I would say also, one of the things I talk about for quality control, and certainly if we know we're getting it from a quality company, then we're less suspicious of the quality control. But sometimes when we're getting any herb, for that matter, from a company we're less familiar with, we have a client coming in with a product, and we're like, how do I know whether this product is any good? Is it not working because it's the wrong herb or herb formula, or is it not working because the product's garbage, like it's floor sweepings? And tasting it is one of the ways that we do that. And I teach my students organoleptic testing, where smells like, looks like, tastes like, must be, right? And so we know a good cup of chamomile tea is very different from a bad one, and we can smell the fruitiness that's supposed to be in chamomile. Ashwagandha, if I remember right, is Sanskrit for horse urine, and has a distinct odor and taste to it that's not particularly yummy. It's not horse urine tasting, but it does have kind of a gaminess to it when it's fresh. So if we're hiding that under an infusion into honey or some other way that that's being made, we may not be able to tell whether it's good quality. And so the less processed, the less hidden a flavor, the easier it is to tell the quality of a product frequently. So, can you tell what I really think about gummies? All right, now I got to be able to read my list. All right, I had an interesting one, and I had to double check myself on this one. There's a question about polymyalgia rheumatica, which is one of the second most common types of chronic inflammatory disorders, second only to like rheumatoid arthritis, and kind of not really related. And it's really funny that there isn't a test for polymyalgia rheumatica, and that's PMR is easier to say than the mouthful of that particular disorder. So it's an inflammatory condition that's not well understood. There are no tests for it. So the test is usually we rule out all the other possibilities like RA, trauma, bursitis, I can't think of all the other ones. And so everything from imaging to make sure there isn't injury or trauma to the area. And it theoretically only shows up in two locations, the hip joint and the shoulder joint. So if you don't have PMR, if it's in your wrist, then you got something else. I'm going to eat a lot of mosquitoes for the next hour and a half. I don't even need to eat dinner tonight. So it will, and it's interesting. So when you look at the symptom pattern of PMR, it is inflammatory in its nature. It is not tested as another disorder. It gets better with exercise. So usually after you get moving and after an hour or so, you're like, oh, that's not so bad. It will respond to steroids. It sometimes will respond to NSAIDs. And there really isn't any treatment. It's managed. Now, what I'm gonna switch to more energetic Chinese medicine, when we look at the hips and shoulders, we say they're the same. So if we've got elbow pain, we might treat the opposite knee. And so, oh, and that was the other criteria. It's bilateral, so it's on both sides. So if it's only in one shoulder or one hip, then it ain't the PMR. Um, we can certainly use anti-inflammatory herbs, and using those herbs as a replacement. We can use some of the herbs that are more steroidal like smilax and licorice and so forth. But the reality, if a pain gets better with exercise, it is usually either a chi stagnation, stress is an oversimplification but accurate, or deficiency. And so the uniqueness of where the pain is will lead us to a understanding of an area of the body, or a particular line of energy, a meridian, that allows us to either do acupuncture. Yeah, there's no shortage of mosquitoes here today. We are eaten alive today with them. So I would actually say for PMR, a combination of herbs and acupuncture would probably be the most effective. And then a lot of it would depend then on the pattern of the individual and what brought it on. In this case, I believe she mentioned it was stress. And so that would lead us more to the concept of chi stagnation and likely an involvement of the gallbladder meridian. Not your actual gallbladder, but the gallbladder meridian. And probably a modified, yeah, it's like I have to think of all the answers on the fly while being attacked by mosquitoes as I sip wine. So like, watch out. Who knows what crazy crap I'm going to say tonight. But can end writing in Chinese. Yes, I would probably do a modified Duho Ji Sheng Tong. Sorry, that one's better for deficiency. It might actually work if there was chi stagnation. Oddly enough, Jiawei Shaiyuan or Free and Easy Wanderer Plus, one are just off the top of my head. Depending on where the pain was worse, we might be able to guide a formula to that herb using something like, oops, not H7, Duho, which is a Duho is an Angelica, or Chung Ho, which is a Ligusтрicum, I think. And either one of those, we could take a formula that was appropriate, add that herb in, and guide it to the area where we're getting the most pain. And that's really one of the cool things. I feel like Chinese has done that better than some tradition. In Western herbal medicine, we tend to have herbs that guide to a tissue, and sometimes to an organ. The Chinese do that as well, but they add in there to an area of the body. And we get that a little bit. We have a few herbs we do that in Western. And it's just, I feel like it's stylized much better in Chinese. Sorry, I'm going to show off my mug because all of you are coming here. Wait, how do we do this? Oh, yay! Promoting the AHG. Let's hear from American Herbalist Guild. If you don't know it, all of you, if you're not already a member of AHG, you should be. You can be a student member, a general member, or a professional member. And the volumes of information they have for every traditions about legal and ethical questions, so much information that's archived for their practitioners. For my students, we do our very best to meet the criteria for the American Herbalist Guild professional membership, the RH, Registered Herbalist. But also, I just think everybody, as they go into this profession, should support their professional organization. In the same way, I know some of you are acupuncturists on here, and you want to support both your state and national organizations to make sure that your voice is heard and represented in the state and national level. The same is true for herbalists. So they do a really good job. Their conference rocks, and there are CEUs for acupuncturists. Usually the NCCOM CEUs is available for acupuncturists. All right, let's see if I can read the next one. I'm going to skip that one for later. Oh, let's talk about pickles. Nervines for puppy dogs. So nervines generally are say most of your nervines are going to be safe for dogs. Um, and if we're talking like thunderstorms, oh, that's super interesting. All right, I'm going to come back. All right, let's talk about that since we were already talking about the PML. Um, so I missed that the statin drugs he took a while back caused that. And yes, they may have misdiagnosed that as the PML. So that is not specific. There is a type of myalgia that's caused by statin drugs, but I don't believe it's the rheumatica. It's a myalgia though, and it's usually all the muscles, not limited to the shoulders and hips, although it can be that. It usually starts lower in the body and works its way up and can encompass the whole body. So yes, that could easily cause a yin deficiency. I find statin drugs do cause a drying up of tissues. We see that it's starting to see research that it can be a contributing factor to things like type 2 diabetes, dementia, and all kinds of other creepy things. And one of the best ways to avoid that, if for some, although it doesn't sound like from what you told me that he needs to get on statins, they just like that's what they do. But if for some reason he's forced to do it, he might, as a minimum, look at taking CoQ10. Coenzyme Q10 seems to be preventative of some of the side effects of the statin drugs. And that's something you can easily get over the counter. It's hard to do too much. Unfortunately, it's a little pricey to get the good stuff, but usually starting at about 200, I think it's IUs or milligrams, I forget which form it comes in, is just generally good heart protective, but also it's called ubiquinol because it's ubiquitous in every cell of the body, but concentrated in the heart, and so really protective of heart tissue, heart muscle, and seems to minimize the side effects of some of the statin drugs if there's some reason he's on there. And the suggestion of switching to, I forget which one, although sometimes switching does avoid the side effects, I do find that it's frequently a lower grade inflammatory response, that it's just showing up as a different way. Certainly if there is some research that's showing statins have some benefit in certain cases, I always say make sure that they do a full lipid panel and see if there is an issue, and in general reducing inflammation in the body, because that's where we start getting stuff sticking to the walls of the blood vessels. All right. Yeah, and so I would say I would try all kinds of things, like he already exercises, diet obviously has an impact, maintaining the low blood sugar, exercise, diet, healthy fats can have a dramatic impact on that. So one of the nice tests for low essential fatty acids to see whether you should supplement with that. You guys have no idea. My screen is covered with mosquitoes and other bugs. Is checking the back of the arm, the tricep, and if it's bumpy back there, then I generally find, and some people say it's a B12 deficiency, it may be that as well, but I find a better correlation with the essential fatty acids. So usually upping your fish oil or your plant oils will usually within a few weeks start to remedy that and will start to reduce inflammation. So statins are cholesterol's not the concern. If they're in the slightly elevated level, then the real concern is if there's also inflammation in the body, then the body's going to start putting that plaster, putting that cholesterol in to repair the damage happening to the blood vessel walls. So definitely one to reduce inflammation. In his case, I know this guy, reduce stress will probably help immensely. So, all right, Pickles, I didn't mean to ignore your puppy dogs. So, when we look at nervines, we oftentimes look specifically at how that dysfunctional nervous system starts to show up. And not to say we can't just do the poo-poo platter of all the nervines into a bucket. The reality is, if it's loud noises like thunderstorms and things like that, which are frequent aggravators for puppy dogs, then something like, I love high dose skull cap for that. But if it's an overall nervous puppy dog, then there's a couple, and Pickles, I'm pretty sure you've got the 4 paws 5 directions, so some of those suggestions in there are good. But looking at the body type, what's the nature of that dog, can be really helpful for trying to choose the right approach from a constitutional standpoint. And so recognizing that we've got wood betony is better for a hotter dog. We have blue vervain can be for that dog who, it's funny, the dog who barks at everybody who walks by the window. Blue vervain might be a really good one. It would be on kind of on the. It would be like almost acne on the arm. It's literally, it just feels a rough texture compared to, let's say, on the top of the arm. So your bicep would be smooth. Your tricep would literally have a rougher texture. So it's like almost acne, but it's not. It can get as bad as acne, but it would just be a rough surface. Man, mosquitoes are eating me alive. So if it's I bark at everybody, that's the controlling nature of the dog. You're not following the rules. You're supposed to come to the door and pet me. And so that type A personality of a dog, if a dog can, oh, okay, so hot and wet. So if he's tending towards hot and wet, thinking excess, that's a big dog. So milky oats is great, but not the right one for him because that's moistening. So like a wood betony, blue vervain might be good. If it's scared at thunderstorms, maybe a blue vervain with a lot of skull cap. If it's obsessive licking, I tend to think passion flower. That's the circular thinking, but it's a circular behavior, the excessive licking that can sometimes happen. And also looking for humans, when we think of anxiety, there's oftentimes a component of anemia or blood deficiency that's present. And even though that's, big dog and all that, if they seem like they have a really dry coat, you said hot and wet, so not necessarily dry. And also the looking to make sure there's not inflammatory food. The classics, smell the ears and smell the paws. And that can indicate there's some hot phlegm usually. That can be a yeast or fungus. And I usually look to the foods with that. Oh, that's funny. It's just thunderstorms and fireworks. So it's more of a daily behavior than you're seeing that anxiety. And so I always think of those dogs who are always barking at the window for everybody who walks by, that they're trying to control their environment. That is the definition of blue vervain. So if you haven't tried that on him, and that's a big dog, like, don't be afraid of dosing a 76-pound puppy dog. So because a lot of you are in Florida, I'm going to give out one of my secrets just because, wow, I think the mosquitoes are making it seem like it's longer. It's like, I've only been doing this for 30 minutes. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna be anemic by the time I'm done. So for any of you who are not familiar with SwiftMud, Southwest Water Management District. There we go. So this is the abbreviation. SwiftMud is the Southwest Water Management District, and I believe there are 7, blast from the past, I believe there's 7 water management districts in the state of Florida. I don't know about other states, sorry. But this is a state organization that is charged with buying up large tracts of land specifically on our aquifer, and to ensure that we still have some semblance of clean water and natural environment, because that is one of the benefits of Florida. We have a lot of natural area here. Yes. Actually, horses, yeah, are kind of more sensitive. Um, and so dogs are pretty much, if we go 120 to 140 pounds as a human and we dose our standard doses, dogs would be the same thing. So for a 76-pound dog, you would do basically half of an adult dose for a dog that size. And afraid of people, so that's different. Sorry, I'll get back to Swift Mud. I'm ADD and tired from walking all day. The afraid of people is different. So although that could be a nervous behavior, the that's fear. And so when we look at that, either it can be a PTSD if he was a rescuer or abused in his past, which unfortunately is so common with dogs. Or it can just be a constitutional weakness, and we would say the kidney energy in Chinese medicine. And so looking at kind of those nourishing adaptogens would be really helpful. I would probably, I don't like giving nightshades to dogs. I don't know if they have the same issues, but they have a hard time fessing up. So finding a adrenal or creating an adrenal formula that's nourishing and I would say a little cooling would be helpful, and that might strengthen the fear so that it's not that he feels safer. Also massage on the sorry, there's a huge moth walking across my screen looking at it. Massaging on kidney points, on particular on the urinary bladder 23 area, and kidney 3 on the hind legs right by the ankles can be really helpful for those fearful dogs. And because he's hot and wet, you'd probably look at a combination of maybe a little Eleuthero, Siwuja, the Eleuthero ginseng, which isn't a true ginseng. I don't know, maybe some dandelion root, or some asparagus root, something along those lines might be nice. You also wouldn't be wrong with doing a little mimosa. I would just do a pinch of mimosa in there. Yeah, those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. And still wouldn't be wrong with throwing in some of those others, just based on, think about what's the personality of the plant and match it up with the personality of, two-legged or four-legged. It doesn't matter what kind of a critter. And also, if you haven't played with flower essences are phenomenal for dogs. And that is a kind of an emotional homeopathic, for lack of dumbing it down ever so much. But I love doing flower essences for dogs and cats and other critters too. Swift mud. I was like, boy, I'm feeling ADD and I ate and everything. So Swift Mud is Southwest Water Management, 7 different management districts throughout the state of Florida, charged with preserving pasture land and so forth. No, I got to try to work it out. I'll catch up in my brain, or maybe it's the wine. But the Swift Mud property, is part of their charter, they actually have to make the Swift Mud lands available to the public, and they do it at no cost. And so there is sometimes it's just daytime recreation, but they have horse camping as well as primitive camping that's available free of charge, where you just have to reserve it in advance, and they'll give you the gate combination so you could go in, allowed an open fire. It is oftentimes one of my favorites is Potts Preserve, P-O-T-T. It's 5,000 acres with maybe, they now added some campsites, like a dozen campsites. It's usually car camping, although some of them are backpacking out or walking a very short distance. And so some of my favorite campsites around Florida are all part of the Swift Mud property. If you haven't explored it, don't, because I want that campsite. I'm just kidding. Like right now we're out here on this weekend, and admittedly it's a holiday weekend, and there are I think 6 campsites out here and only 2 other groups out here. Yes, asparagus root is shatavari and also tianmendong. So we see it's tianmendong. Tianmendong is the western. It's steamed, which modifies it a little bit, but shatavari, and it's funny, they actually have a disagreement. When you look at the Latin names, they're the same genus and species, and theoretically it's a subspecies. And I'm always curious. We don't actually see the American asparagus, even though it's the same Latin name. We don't see it used for medicine to dig up the roots. And I've always wondered, because there's so much written about shatavari, there's so much written about tianmendong. It's in so many of our formulas. And I'm like, can we do the same thing with the American asparagus? And I don't have the answer to that because it's really hard to grow asparagus in Florida. So I have no experience with it. All right, then we did that. Whoops. Sorry, it's really hard to read this. Oh, there was a fun question that was brought up. Oh, we got the nervines for puppies. There was an interesting question that came up about practitioners and kind of how we go about stuff. And it's funny, I always say that herbalists in particular, but I would say a lot of acupuncturists as well, that we get into this profession because we're not being served by the Western medical community. That, we tried the doctors, we took the meds, we did all the tests, and the reality is you don't feel any better. And so out of desperation, we start to explore alternative medicine. And whether it's chiropractic, whether it's naturopaths, whether it's herbalists or acupuncturists, and if we're lucky, they're able to figure it out by looking at it through a new paradigm. But what that means is, and so yay, we get better, and that was definitely part of my story as well. As we get better and we decide, like, no, we want to share our excitement about this wonderful art, whether it's herbs, acupuncture, or whatever, that saved our lives frequently, that we want to share this with others, so we start to pursue it. But it may mean it looks like you got hit by a truck. You may have been hit by a truck. Literally, I had a guy who was in a coma for 6 months after being run over by a bulldozer. And so, like, that happens. And so sometimes our practitioners are coming at it through their own paradigm. Sometimes they're not the healthiest looking people because of that. And I don't think the health of the practitioner, by looking at their outward appearance, I don't think that's fair to judge them. And I've literally heard people say, is like, I don't want to go see them because they don't look healthy. And it's like, they probably should be dead, and they look great for being a dead person. And so I always caution people about looking at it through that perspective. None of us are perfect. We're all on our internal struggle. But the other side of that coin is, because most of us got here through our own imbalances, our own illness, we frequently see things through the lens of our own sickness. And like for me, it was a lot of immune issues and digestive issues. Well, guess what I do the most work in? Digestive issues and immune and complex things. And so if somebody says, I have pain, and the practitioner goes, oh, I have pain too, you must have fibromyalgia, that's not fair. And so it is a dangerous slope for the practitioner to see other people's illnesses or disharmonies through their own paradigm of imbalance. And I caution a lot of my practitioners for that they leap at the easy solution of, you must have what I have, when each of us have our own unique path to imbalance, and therefore should have a unique path to finding balance again. And just because a particular diet worked for one person doesn't mean it's the right diet for other people. So it is one of the hardest things, I think, is to come with a blank. We have all the knowledge that we have, either from formal training or informal training, um, and to come understanding a paradigm of what does imbalance look like, and accepting each person, with a blank slate. We're going in there, like if you have an intake sheet, and we're going to ask lots of questions, to just assume that we know nothing, we assume nothing, and go through this mystery of their health, their path that they've taken to the point where they're so desperate they're going to go see an herbalist or an acupuncturist, as the case may be, and cool critters shouting in the background. Oh, y'all probably can't hear it, but there's a huge owl back here. There's a barred owl. Oh, super cool. Sorry, hopefully you can hear that. It was very quiet. We haven't seen a lot of critters except for birds out here, but lots of signs of deer and hog and otter and raccoons, but haven't seen a furry thing yet. So nice that the birds are always a neat one to see out here. And there is the blood-sucking birds that are huge flocks of them. So I think it's for each one of us, where you are in your journey of your own personal health journeys, or that of as an herbalist or an acupuncturist who's helping people, is to recognize that no one is the exact same as you, that each one of us is special and unique, and need their own unique motivation, their own unique diet, and of course herbs and approach, and there's no one size fits all. It's one of the flaws I see so often when we're like, everybody should do this diet and insert whatever diet you want. There's no single diet that's appropriate, and so I always look for similarities of traditional diets, and so I take that very traditional standpoint with a nice dose of science tossed in for fun. All right, I'll get off that soapbox. We said something about that. I might rant about that a little bit more. Man, I can't read my own. Oh, that's what I just said. Man, it is hard to read my. Oh, I did want to talk about this one's my own, or not me personally, but I was recently contacted by a woman in Jamaica, and it's always fun. I get the weirdest emails sometimes, and she had, I think it was her significant other, had chronic hiccups for 6 years now, and he's now in his 60s, and they've been getting progressively worse. To the point where it's kind of nonstop and interfering with life more than average. And she had, I don't know where the heck she read this, but I found it on the internet, that 15 years ago or so, I had the privilege of treating Hiccup Girl. Some of you may remember that. She was in the national news, all over the local news, and it was this young girl, teenager in high school, who got the hiccups, and they didn't stop. They were violent, non-stop hiccups that had gone on for months, and nothing anybody could do was seeming to help. So I had contacted actually the reporter, who then contacted the family and offered to help her. And lo and behold, I was, it's one of those things. I'm going to guess most of us have not treated chronic hiccups a lot. And I've treated now 3 cases, which I think is a lot. And Hiccup Girl was my first, so I was like, I made a bold statement of like, yes, I can fix these, piece of cake. And then I went and researched the hell out of all the different patterns it could be, and I was primarily working from the Chinese medicine paradigm, and I was thinking it was primarily going to be an acupuncture approach, although there were herb formulas that would have been appropriate. And so I had them all written down on a cheat sheet. I was prepared. I knew what questions I had to ask, and it was a little unnerving. Like those hiccups were loud and intense and nonstop, and she didn't match a single one of the patterns. And so I was like, all right, throw that cheat sheet out the door. And so I did a very thorough history. And, if you're really into weird sciencey stuff, there is a branch of the vagus nerve that specifically affects the diaphragm, and both breathing and your hiccups are controlled by your diaphragm. It's a spasming of the diaphragm, basically. And so as I threw out the energetic Chinese medicine concept out the door, I was like, all right, if energetics doesn't work, let's go with science. And so she had a reoccurring infection for the couple of months prior, and did multiple rounds of antibiotics and steroids and all this other stuff, but it kept coming back. So all of a sudden, she got well, doing the same treatment she'd done before. Her obvious symptom of illness went away for this, I think it was an upper respiratory illness. And then literally 2 weeks later, hiccups showed up. And so nobody made the connection between those two. And what I hate to say it, I made up of like, this makes sense to me, was that whatever this bacteria or virus was that had affected her for the few months prior had encapsulated on this branch of the vagus nerve, and was causing an inappropriate stimulation of that nerve, causing the hiccups. And until we chased that bacteria or viruses out of her body, and I don't remember which it was, that's why I keep saying that, that until we got rid of that, she wasn't going to get well. And so we didn't, we see precedents of that when we talk about herpes virus, shingles. It is a chickenpox virus that is encapsulated on a nerve that periodically, when our immune system gets compromised, it shows up as these horrible blistering rashes. So we see that in other examples where bacteria or virus can attach to a nerve and cause symptoms uniquely for that. And I think this was just kind of, it magically hit the right spot on this nerve. So I gave her a probiotic because she'd done multiple rounds of antibiotics and she needed that to fix her gut. And I gave her, I believe it was Antigraphis formula, if I remember right. It was 15 years ago, I should remember. And the next day she stopped hiccuping. And she was supposed to do a follow-up in 2 weeks around the time she would be running out of the formula. And she continued on with her TV shows and all the other stuff and never came back for her follow-up. And lo and behold, about the time she would have run out of her herbs, the hiccups started back up again after a 2-week hiatus. So I have a feeling I probably could have had a more permanent, I believe she ended up then going and getting that nerve cauterized, because if you cut the nerve, it don't have a symptom anymore. I won't swear to that. And oddly enough, about 5 years later, she was arrested for murder, and is in jail for life imprisonment for a murder she perpetrated. And I would say she was an interesting person. She had an odd personality, and in hindsight, I didn't know the word pandus then, but pandus is just now in the last 5 years or so being recognized as a disorder, and it is I believe it's Staphylococcus, somehow causing an inflammation of the brain, and it causes bizarre behavior changes, primarily affects children. And I want to say that may have been a strep infection that she had dealt with multiple times. So just guessing, I wish I had had the opportunity to do repeated follow-ups with her after the fact. So oddly enough, she made national news, blah, 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 was flying all over. About 2 years, I think, after I treated her in our intern clinic, and so we have a student clinic 3 nights a week, where people come in off the street, and either our acupuncture interns on Monday nights or herb interns on Tuesday and Wednesday night come in, and for $15 can get evaluated, and me or one of the other folks there supervises. And so this was my first location when I was on 9th and Central. And this one gentleman came in, he was on an acupuncture night, and he came in and he had had chronic hiccups for, it was either 2 or 3 years, where Hiccup Girl had only had it for like 3 months. I don't remember how long, but it wasn't very long. And his was not a good story because he basically broke up with his wife or girlfriend, got drunk, fell down, woke up with hiccups, and nobody can figure out how to fix them. And he did. He was a soft-spoken young black man, and I guess that doesn't play on the evening news quite as well as the 13-year-old white girl. So I found his case fascinating, and chronic hiccups is a fairly rare disorder. And I tried to do acupuncture. He matched a little bit of that liver attacking stomach pattern in Chinese medicine, and couldn't get a single needle in him. He was so high strung, he about jumped off the table when we tried to put an acupuncture needle in just stomach 36, which would have been a good starting point. And he was like, not doing it. I don't care if it does cure my hiccups. And we ran outside to have a cigarette. And I was like, all right, we got to come up with another plan. And went outside. He was afraid to come in, that we'd like tackle him and drag him in, put acupuncture needles in him. We don't do that. So I was like, come on, let me just, and I had to show him some ear seeds, and we put ear seeds on him. Auricular therapy sounds way cooler than ear seeds. And he was nervous just at that. He thought we were going to like somehow sneak a sharp object in there. And just did not a protocol, and maybe something else, maybe 0 point. And before he finished his cigarette, yeah, before he finished his cigarette, his hiccups stopped for the first time in however many years. We gave him an herb formula to harmonize, and as far as I know, fixed his hiccups with that. Yeah, I like, obviously, one of the things we do in acupressure, in acupuncture, with belly breathing, there's so many things that we do that engage the vagus nerve. So working with the vagus nerve, working on vagal tone, I think is vital for our survival. And I'm embarrassed I can't think of the branch of the vagus nerve. I know this word. To burn that nerve seems like a poor choice, especially when there were other techniques that were working, and that now does not address the why. And so if I have finger pain and I just cut my finger off, that's not really solving the problem in a viable way. So the idea of cauterizing, burning that nerve so it no longer functions, just seems like a bad idea. So, so lo and behold, and we may end up having this next month's discussion, the gentleman in Jamaica, hence this very long way around of this conversation, the gentleman in Jamaica, he didn't personally contact me. The friend or girlfriend or whatever contacted me, and was prepared to fly to Florida, and which is sweet, but I'm like, yeah, like, I don't know nothing about this guy. I don't want you to fly all the way over here if I can't help him. And so I wrote him back and said, like, tell you what, get together a full medical history, give me a picture of his tongue, give me all the weird things and what you've tried and not tried, and let's see if we can do it from distance. And I got the impression they didn't have any money. So I was like, well, tell you what, we may use you as a case discussion from my students. And if we can figure it out, sorry, I don't mean to scare everybody, but that mosquito is driving me nuts. If we can do it as case discussion, obviously leaving out his personal information, name, and so forth, which they agreed to. So I'm hoping that they do it. And, I don't know, they might be on here listening, but, probably rather than them flying up here, I was like, I might be down for a free trip to Jamaica. I haven't been there in a while, so. No, not really relaxing the diaphragm, although that's a technique. In the case of any muscle, we have some part of our nervous system controls that, and so if that nerve is misfiring, then it's going to send the wrong signals and cause spasming. In this case, that spasm is creating this gasp for air, the hiccup. Um, and so I'm sure some abdominal massage would be phenomenal. And it's funny, there are not many massage therapists who will do diaphragmatic work or abdominal work at all. And I think abdominal massage is so powerful. I'm a big fan of mind abdominal massage. Some massage therapists and acupuncturists are certified in that. It's usually used for women specifically for things like infertility, tilted uterus, painful menses, but can be used for men as well. And I used to have a massage therapist at our clinic that did it, and I remember saying to her once, I was like, I don't really understand what you do, so is this something you can do for men, not just for women? And it was one of the most intense massages I've ever had, even though it was not deep. It wasn't like a deep tissue kind of massage. You know, we've all had those, and I like it. It was actually very gentle, and I hold all my stress in my belly. So it was one of those things where it was somewhat physically intense, even though it wasn't deep and it wasn't painful. It was just intense, and it was actually emotionally challenging as well. So I'm a huge fan of the mind abdominal massage. I just saw the Jen Pohl, who's the local person who does it, and I just saw her out. We saw Rising Appalachia. Took the whole office out to hear them play locally, and they ran into the massage therapist, and she's like, yeah, there's about a year waiting list to get in with me. She was like, everybody books, all of her regulars book out for like eternity, so that they're able to get in there, and she's got 2 kids now, I think. So I was like, fine, somebody else needs to teach this. So hopefully we'll be talking more about the hiccup dude instead of the hiccup girl. All right. I got to do my station identification. So if you're just joining us, it looks like we got a fair crowd on here. Feel free to post your questions on here and join us. I'm happy to grab things as they go. You guys are being kind to me tonight. And I'm Bob Linde from the Tradition School of Herbal Studies. I don't normally do this from the middle of the woods, but tonight I am. If you're interested in our classes, please check out traditionsherbschool.com. And if you've missed part of this or want to see all of the past 2 years worth, check out our YouTube for Tradition School of Herbal Studies. Or if you're interested in the clinical aspect, we've got an ongoing clinic. You can learn more at AcuHerbals, AcuHerbals.com. And we're in downtown St. Pete, kind of, what is that, Grand Central District, St. Pete, 2520 Central Avenue. And we've got 4 acupuncture physicians. Somebody's there 6 days a week. And 2 herbalists. And 1 more energy spiritual worker, and we've got a full apothecary with well over 800 herbs that you can come in and say, hey, I want $1 worth of chamomile. And then 3 nights a week we have intern clinics. So on Monday nights are acupuncture interns from East West College, and I'm hoping to add Dragon Rises to my students in there. On Tuesday night we have Western herb students getting practice. And on Wednesday night, my Chinese students are there. And hopefully I've threatened this now, I think the last few times, have fun, pickles, that watch also, we're going to have the West Coast of Florida chapter of American Herbalist Guild. We're going to get that going again and hold some elections and get some meetings. So if you're in the area, I hope you can join us. Oh yes, and we also have a plant nursery at the clinic as well. So herbal apothecary, intern clinic, doctor's clinic, herbal apothecary, or the plant nursery in the back that you like. I hate to say it, if you've never been in there, you have to say it's like, hey, I need to go look at the plants in the back. And there's a beautiful area with lots of medicinal plants, a pond with pretty fishies, some beautiful Amazonite stones that you can sit on out there and chill out before or after. And if I'm free, I'm usually happy to show people around, but sometimes I'm in seeing a patient. Oh, yes, and we've got the teaching garden at the school. So the school is located different from the clinical practice. So if you do come by to see the gardens or to take any of our classes that are there almost every single weekend, as well as Thursday and sometimes Friday nights, make sure you get the address 6340 Central Avenue, also in St. Pete. So it's a couple of blocks from the clinic itself. And there's a half-acre teaching medicinal garden in the back with ceremonial circle in there. All right, back onto these questions. As I say, if you're just joining us, feel free to post a question. I will do my very best to catch up to them. All right, we did that. Oh, let's talk about, there's that one, where is it? Black seed. Somebody asked about black seed, and I'm going to say black seed rather than black seed oil, because traditionally both have been used, and it's put out there now as this kind of magical thing that cures everything. And there is a saying that black seed cures everything but death. I haven't seen anything cure that, although I did find a book in old book in Chinese medicine that was how to bring the dead back. Something about stuffing live cockroaches up your nose, and if you try to do that to me, I will come back and haunt you. So there's a number of things that are put out there for that kind of an idea. Black seed is really in Persian medicine and Ani Tibbs. We see that in Greek medicine, and I'm sure there's a few other traditions that use the black seed oil. I've not worked with it a lot. I do like it for phlegm and for active lung infections. I find it excellent. It's very, almost like a garlic oil. It's intense and very aromatic and acrid. I see people using it long term, and I tend not to see it used for, I have not used it for that, for long term use. I also find it very warming. So somebody who has a lot of phlegm, a lot of heat, and yellow discharge, I would be less likely to use it. But active infection, especially lung infection, maybe lung tonsils infection, it would probably be helpful. It wouldn't be wrong to use it for COVID. I want to say I know a couple of people who used it. They had it on hand, and I recommended it. To clean up a smoker's cough, it wouldn't be wrong. It's going to bring some crud out, but I don't see it as one that I would use long term. And I have not tried to cure death with it. I know it's put out there as a cure for cancer, and I'm hesitant with that kind of a moniker on there. I'm always like, if we look at Persian medicine, what is its traditional use? Is it specific for a particular pattern? And not my area of expertise at all. But I've done a little bit of research and used it a few times with folks, always for lung conditions. And I'm cautious if they have a lot of heat. Like I wouldn't give it to somebody with a high fever. I don't think it would be the best choice. I was going to say something else about that. Oh, and there was another COVID-y kind of question. They were looking at research of using providine iodine in the nose as a COVID prevention. And I will say I don't know about that. That one is challenging. I can safely say I've never used that. That form of iodine is the stuff like before you go and give blood that they turn you kind of a brownish orange when they swab your elbow or to draw blood. And so it is a form of iodine that kills everything. Whew, that finally shut up. Sorry, that buzzing in the background was my fancy battery charger to keep everything charged up whilst we do this. And oh yeah, if we're able to, it's probably just overheating is all. Thank you. The reality, and I didn't see this study, and we always have to be careful when we're looking at studies as to whether they are test tube studies, whether they're human subject studies, uh, um, as to what is the most effective approach to that. Um, and so there was, what was it I just saw? Oh, there was something about picking your nose leads to dementia. And I was like, when I saw that, um, oh yeah, let me answer your black seed question. So most people buy the oil. I actually prefer the seeds, and I've crushed the seeds up, and it's important that they're crushed and then eaten them. Uh, the oil is the extracted oil from those seeds, the pressed oils from those seeds, so cold pressed, which is good. And I want to say there was a few times where I mixed the oil with the crushed seeds to just kick it up a notch. Um, but eating any seeds always should be crushed. Most seeds are designed to pass through your digestive. Oh yeah, let me get that one next. Let me finish my babbling about whatever the hell I was babbling. Oh, iodine, um, gum disease, um, disease. So when we're reading research, that it was literally just a few days ago, there was some research that said picking your nose led to dementia, and I was like, oh, I got to read this. I get the craziest things that come up, and basically they found that they were doing a mouse study, and by they were seeing that a bacterial infection was increased if they pluck the nose hairs. And I'm like, how in the hell did they do that with these poor little mices? Um, and that it caused inflammation in the brain, which would lead to that. And so they made this leap of nose picking brain issue, that there was an increased risk of this bacterial infection affecting your brain, causing dementia. And so when we read research to see whether it's in vitro, which means it's a test tube, which is not meaningless. In vitro is important, but not to create treatment ideas, um, but in order to do more research. And I'm sure most of us have seen the meme go through on Facebook that, stevia cures Lyme disease, I think it is. And when you go, all right, let me see where the research. This is not a traditional use, so let me find the research. Some brilliant person must have come up with this. The only research is in a test tube. And so the reality is that's BS. It's a great way to sell stevia, but it's not a good way to treat Lyme disease. Gasoline also cures Lyme disease. Just put some Lyme disease in a test tube, throw in the gasoline, and everything will die. Bleach too. I don't recommend it. In vivo, then we have to look at, and so that's in a living subject. So is it in a mouse, a dog, a cat, a pig, a monkey, or a human? And very few herb studies are done on humans. And so I think it's really important that we look at both the critter and its similarity to humans, and also the mode of administration, since it's usually injected into the bloodstream, and most of us are not taking our herbs IM, intramuscular, or IV, and that's usually how they're giving a chemical extraction of a single ingredient to those animals, not the whole herb. So I would say majority of the research on herbs is suspect, and not something that we can do a quick Google search and make leaps of faith about those things. And so I frequently will run the safety through a science check, but I'm always going to look to the traditional uses of those things, and not to say we can't extrapolate that to some of our modern diseases, but it's important to be careful with those kinds of ideas of how far we go with it. Tincturing the crushed seeds, you could probably do that, but it's an oil that you're getting out of the seeds, and so those don't tend to tincture well. You would have to use probably a very high proof alcohol, like a 95% alcohol, to get the oils out of that. So you're better off with a cold pressed seed oil on those, because they're really oily. trying to think of a good example of those. So yeah, I like, yes, I'm through science we can tincture anything, but that whole water and oil don't mix, so you probably would be challenged to do 100 proof vodka with the crushed seeds. Um, doing the doing a pressed oil, you'd get more product out of it, and it would be a little intense, but it's not that bad. So gum disease. I actually, oh my God, what's her face who wrote the book on herbal dental hygiene, and her name just flew out of my head. Duh, duh. Somebody help me out there. Somebody will remember. But I find some, and there's different types of gum disease. Um, I've done a little bit of oil pulling, and I've heard and seen some benefits from it. The hardest part is most people aren't willing to do it and to be consistent about it. So I think there is value to that if you can be consistent. Um, Five, yeah. So our Ayurvedic guru here is saying that you don't have to do the full 20 minutes, just a good 5 minutes is more than enough. Um, and has very real benefits to it. I also find that sometimes if you get, like, every time you brush your teeth you're spitting out a mouthful of blood, that's sometimes just very fragile skin, and that can come from infection and so forth. But it can also be a sign of vitamin C deficiency. So I am a fan of Linus Pauling, and so don't give yourself the runs from doing too much vitamin C, but increasing your vitamin C content. If you're don't mind doing capsules, doing like 500 milligrams 2 or 3 times a day would be great. See if that has an impact. And then I love a toothpaste that is myrrh or frankincense based. Yes, Leslie Alexander. She's the one who, God, I'm embarrassed I can't think of her name. She's a friend. Leslie Alexander's book on herbal dental care is phenomenal, and so highly recommend it. Um, and I need to get another copy and make her sign it. We had her here a couple of years ago to teach a class on cordials, which was a hoot. She is a wonderful person to have come stay for a couple of days. But I love the frankincense and myrrh based toothpaste, and I haven't looked in a while, but I've seen phenomenal impacts from doing that twice a day. I've not tried to do a vinegar for a seed oil before, because vinegars are mostly water-based. My guess is that make a good salad dressing, but that's about it. I mean, think about it when you do oil and vinegar. One's water, one's oil, and we shake it up and pour it on our salad, but they separate. They quickly separate in there. So that's exactly what would happen if you put the seed oils in there. Also, there's a few interesting things, depending on what kind of gum disease you're looking at. If it's isolated in a particular area, tooth infection or gum infection in an area, I think chew sticks are not used, or herbal dips. We make a tooth powder at the clinic, which is just a ground up formula that I kind of came up with, that we use for tooth infection. They just take a pinch and put it in, but by the tooth, is phenomenal. Also, echinacea as a topical to swish to do a mouth rinse with can be very effective. And I also think, certainly if dental issues are there, I always go, why? And there are many reasons why disease can be there. But things that people forget, it's like, yeah, if you didn't brush your teeth forever and ever, then of course. If it's a congenital issue, and that can be a congenital issue as well, then of course that's harder to fix. But low stomach acid is a very common problem. And so literally those gases are coming up from the stomach and can cause tooth erosion and infection. chronic sinus infections can have a problem with it. So kind of looking at uh, why is there dental issues, and that may make it easier for you to go about that process of getting it repaired. Um, and it's funny, I used to say you ain't replacing the enamel. I've actually, although I've not personally worked on them, I've actually seen some good success in people with things like the oil pulling, the working with herbs internally, and minor changes in diet make a difference in the tooth enamel, to the point where I'm like, if I hadn't seen it for myself, I wouldn't have believed it. And so I continue to say, I'll shut my mouth and shut up and learn something new. And Leslie would be the first one to tell you, like, it's very, very doable to get that fixed. All right. Anybody else got some questions? Come on. I like things like the dental questions. We don't get those often enough. I'm going to talk a little bit about AHG just for a minute, because I like to put that out for folks. If you're just joining us, if you're not familiar with the American Herbalist Guild, I am, and they're not paying me to say that, and I don't work for them, although I help them whenever I can. I'm a huge fan of our professional organization, and as herbalists, that is our professional organization. I know a lot of you are acupuncture peeps, and they really do appreciate the acupuncturists and do a good nod towards Chinese medicine. But I also think the acupuncture community is oftentimes isolated, even though their training is phenomenal, in herbs especially, that they're detached from all the other cool things that are going on in the herbal realm. Oh, I'm gladly, thank you. Um, the and so where no matter where you are in the realm, whether you're just a hobbyist, whether you're trying to just figure stuff out for yourself, I encourage you to join the American Herbalist Guild, because it's membership that keeps them going. They've been around, I don't know, since the 80s, 89, I forget. And some of the leading herbalists that we have in the U.S. are the founding members. Ooh, like meridians are involved with teeth problems. Yes. Um, okay, I'll come back to HG, because that's a great question. There are, this is not my, I've got the chart somewhere. So every one of your teeth are associated with a meridian slash organ in Chinese medicine. And so, like, why did that particular tooth go bad? Is can be looked at that if all of your teeth are jacked, well, then, that's probably another issue. But when most of your teeth are great, but this one tooth is always a problem, or it's like it's always this one or two, um, then it's frequently we can see a connection between that tooth and your energetic disharmonies. I have one tooth that's jacked, probably needs to come out someday, and it's one of the digestive meridians it's associated with, and it's like, oh, that's where most of my issues lie. So yeah, I do think we can see a correspondence with that. I find it more interesting than something I chase, just because from a diagnostic standpoint, when we're um, going through the process of questioning, trying to figure out their imbalances, um, there's so many other ways to come to an understanding of their imbalances that I'm like, dental questions aren't real high. If there is a dental issue, I think that's relevant. In particular, we tend to see, so Chinese medicine, we make some weird correspondences. Um, so when we talk about an organ, we don't always mean the real organ. We're sometimes talking about the energetic organ. And so with the kidneys, we associate that with the bones, the spine, the brain, and we say that the teeth are an extension of the bones. And so, and we see growth and development, aging are all those things that we associate with the kidneys. So if genetic disorders, Down syndrome, things like that, We sometimes see bone deformities, growth and development disorders. The brain doesn't develop quite right, and we'll see frequently dental problems where increased rate of tooth infections and things like that. And so it's one of those things where the health of the teeth overall, the health of the gums overall, is very relevant to an intake sometimes. And at the very least, we sometimes also, I just think it's cool, we see these correspondences that were written about thousands of years come true. And as I expand to learning the traditions of other cultures besides Chinese and just the generic Western, um, looking at how the cultures in South America and India and Persia, all of those places kind of say the same stuff. And so one of the things you'll hear me say a lot in classes, if for 1,000 years different cultures that had no communication with each other come up with the same conclusions, you should pay attention to that. That it's likely that it is some truth to what they're saying, even if it doesn't match 100% the Western medical correspondences to it all. And I think I've got and feel free to, like, we still got a little bit of time, and I'll babble incoherently until y'all get the hell out of here. No, I'm just kidding. If anybody's got a question, please do post it, because our time is winding down. And I think I've got more acupuncture students and practitioners on here than usual. I always got a couple, but I got a feeling that there's a few extras on here. So something I would say, especially with, I have, I don't know, 6 students from East West College right now coming through the clinic. And one of the things I hear them say a lot, and I'm not unique to this school, I'm seeing this in a lot of the schools, that even though in most states now they're required to take the herbal boards, and that they get at least a year of herbal training in most programs around the entire U.S., that they're being taught to fear herbs. And it's very sad to me. I was working with somebody who's about to graduate literally in like 2 weeks, and the person was on, I don't know, Plavix or something like that, and we were putting together an herbal formula that was, in my eyes, very safe, and we had to be cautious, but Plavix isn't a big, scary, narrow therapeutic margin medication. But basically, they were taught to never give herbs when they were on any prescription drugs, to live in fear that they were going to kill somebody if they did this. And I'm like, I've been doing this for probably 25 years. Most most everybody in the state of Florida is on medications of one form or another, and oftentimes 5 or 10 prescription medications. And although, if you've ever listened to my herb drug interaction class, I do that a couple times a year for free because I don't want people to make mistakes, that you should be cautious with taking herbs and drugs together. That we need to educate ourselves about some basic principles of taking herbs and drugs together. But it is not dangerous or unsafe if you do it with some level of forethought and education. And it does not have to be you don't need a PhD in biochemistry to understand herb drug interactions. There are so few instances when we use plants. Looking at supplementation of nutraceuticals, chemical extractions, is a very different thing from saying, here's a plant, go make an infusion. Here's a herb, go make a decoction. That is a very different animal than doing amino acids and supplementation in that form. So I'm going to encourage you all to not to ignore what you were taught in school, because that would be bad too. But one of the most powerful medicines that has been around longer than anything else is herbal medicine. And although there are many paths to becoming an herbalist, TikTok is not one of them. That if we are doing a health history, if we're following traditional methodologies in putting herbs together, and if they're on prescription medications, we should be using caution and start out in low dosing, watch for adverse events, and increase slowly to a therapeutic level. But the reality is, herbs and drugs work better together oftentimes. We can minimize side effects of the prescription drugs when we use herbs and drugs together. So I, I, I hope that despite what some of the schools are teaching, that people are overcoming that stigma of fear that's sometimes associated with herbs. And not to say that, like, oh, they're natural, they're safe, we can do whatever we want. There are concerns. Quality control, adulteration with prescription medications, which would make that a drug-drug interaction, by the way, of people treating symptoms rather than patterns. All of those are concerns when we do an herb and a drug for the same reason without monitoring symptoms like blood pressure and blood sugar. Those are all things that we need to take into account. But the reality is herbs and drugs should be used together. And I am not anti-drug by any stretch of the imagination. I definitely have my meds I don't like. I'm not a fan of a number of them. But there's a time and a place for every medication. And consistency on the realm of the patient, on the client, is important as well. And so ensuring that they are continuing to take their medications, not just throwing them in the trash, and supplementing them with an herb. And too often we say, this herb lowers blood pressure, this herb cures cancer. Like, no, it doesn't. It's like they help with that, but until we get more extensive research to see what they do, there are ones that seem to help with that, and I see my share of people with cancer. But I would never tell anybody that that's true. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Candida. What do you recommend for a reoccurring candida? Reoccurring candida sucks. Amoxicillin for probiotics, good. Caprylic acid, yes. Good choice on the caprylic acid. Where is the candida is probably the most important question. Candida can show up in a number of places. And what I find is, although caprylic acid is great, dietary change is frequently vital. And depending on where it is, you know, folks, and I always feel bad as people are overweight, if there's folds in the skin, those areas can get very wet and can get candida and other types of infections. Women who have large breasts will sometimes get it under their breasts. Large thighs will get candida. But if they're getting it in the mouth, then I start to think about things like small intestinal bowel overgrowth, which is caused by low stomach acid, frequently caused by low stomach acid. So it's always the why. If it's yeast infections, vaginal yeast infections, it may be necessary to make sure you're getting the acidophilus that's specific for yeast health, and looking at the pH there. The vaginal secretion should be more acidic, hence the acidophilus is preferred, and sometimes actually doing vaginal suppositories that have the acidophilus in it can be really helpful. And sometimes you have to make those yourself. There used to be a wonderful company, but they stopped. They went out of business. They didn't go out of business. They decided to close because there's too much pressure put on them for that. Sorry, just ate a mosquito. And sometimes you have to do higher doses. The biggest thing, if it's vaginal yeast infection or rectal, diet with any of them, diet change becomes predominant, and there's nothing nice about it. The the use, basically you have to get off of fruit, all refined carbohydrates, anything that turns to sugar quickly in the body is going to have to be removed, sometimes for up to 6 months. And correcting the entire terrain of around where that problem is. And the amoxicillin can be good, but ensuring that it's actually, whether it's yeast or bacterial will be important. So sometimes you have to use antifungals. So making sure that it's being tested to see what it is actually that they're trying to kill, and ensuring that either the antifungal or antibacterial is appropriate for what they're going after. I don't know. And I about guarantee if it's oral, like thrush is a type of candida, if it's in above the rib cage or mouth or throat, I guarantee it's low stomach acid. If it's vaginal and it's reinfecting, check the partner. Especially if there's new partners involved. New partners, it's almost common to get a yeast infection. Multiple partners can cause that problem. But also, if it's a single partner, if the partner is uncircumcised, that's more likely to harbor the little yeast beasties in there. And so they have to make sure that the partner's treated as well. And unpleasant questions that I teach my students that they have to ask if they're not finding a better question or a better cause for it is, but I don't have a partner and I eat perfect. It means they're also not cleaning their toys properly. And so you can reinfect if the sex toys aren't being properly treated. And not pleasant conversations to have with people, total strangers, and you start asking them these very personal questions. Can sometimes be the answer. Here in Florida also we see a lot of yeast infections for people who move down the first 2 years. All the college students end up with ridiculous amounts of reoccurring yeast infections because they're wearing nylon underwear. And, obviously really inappropriate for me to ask a client when they come in, what kind of underwear do you have on? But it may be relevant, and I need to ask it a little less inappropriately. So the idea of wearing cotton underwear or going commando, getting out of wet bathing suits can all be a part of that problem. Also, if they're douching, that can throw off the pH of the vagina. If they're taking baths and adding scented, bubbly, blah, 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 blah into the water, it may be that they can't take baths for 6 months or so. And kind of looking at other irritants that might be happening there. If it's an older woman where vaginal dryness is an issue, that doing something to increase the health of the vaginal wall that you can get a lot of. Oh, yeah, that's a good call. Making sure that they're sleeping without underwear is a great call. But the health of the vaginal tissue, if they're postmenopausal, there can be tearing and just delicate tissue that's easily infected. And it's a little bit of a stretch, but sometimes anemia can be an issue as well. And so the dryness that you get on your skin from being anemic can actually translate, especially in that perimenopausal, menopausal woman, can translate into vaginal dryness that's not due to an estrogen deficiency, and can make for easily infected tissues with that. All right. Any other exciting, fun questions? Good one, Tabitha. Tabitha rocks. She's just south of us here and graduated from everything. No, are you still? Yeah, you're still in Chinese. I don't know. She treats humans, animals, and has a product line and all kinds of cool stuff. She rocks it. And she's going to have a family legacy of herbalists if everything goes right with her youngin'. How long can a person take HCl till the cows come home? No. So HCl in a perfect world, 6 months to a year that the body starts to jumpstart in the production of HCl themselves. And maybe you need to supplement occasionally, like on Turkey Day. Um, but if there is a genetic, congenital reason why they're not producing HCl, stomach bypass, something like that, where they're not able to process foods properly, MTHFR issue, if they're eating a vegan diet and not supplementing with B12, B complex, it may be necessary to take it longer. And also, the cause of the low HCl can be stress. And so, if you continue to be in a stressful environment and not managing the stress well, I would argue that take it until your stress improves. Probably 6 months after you're out of a stressful job, life situation. And then you can stop taking it. But the reality is, as long as you're getting no negative side effects, i.e., acid reflux and burning from the HCl, there isn't a reason to stop taking it. The reality is, at some point, your body should start to produce its own HCl appropriately. It's just a question of when. And stress and B12 are the biggest reasons why we're not doing that, unless there is a structural reason for it not to work.
Why do you prefer HCl over bitters, and what do you see as the difference?
Oh, yes, you wanted me to ask this. So, a question from the fire was, what's the difference between HCl and bitters? Which is a great question, and both are really important, actually. So the hydrochloric, ignore the swatting of flies here. For any of you who are just showing up, I am in the middle of the woods being eaten alive by mosquitoes with an iffy connection. And it's the lantern glow that you see illuminating me. So HCl, hydrochloric acid, is specific for your stomach acid. And digestive bitters also has an even longer history of use. And this is specific for your bile secretions from your gallbladder, as well as some of your pancreatic secretions. And there's value to bitter. Also gets our salivary glands going. And so I think digestive bitters are always correct, where HCl may be correct if you have low HCl. I'd say, if no matter whether you have perfect digestion or less than perfect digestion, I think bitters is always correct. Our American diet tends to include a lot of sweet and salty and fatty goodness, and that requires the bile as well as the gallbladder, i.e., the bile secretions, as well as a lot of your pancreatic enzymes in order to process those yummy things. Um, and so the flavor bitter helps to create the salivary secretions for breaking things down, as well as those other organ secretions to better process those nutrients or yumminess. It may or may not have nutrients. Whereas HCl is specific for protein, and also works on, it can be stimulated by bitter, but not enough if you have low HCl. The For anybody who's had their gallbladder removed, which is very common surgery, I think bitters becomes, I'm going to say, vital, or at least really important, especially for holiday time where we're likely to consume more fats. And so what we see is the liver actually produces the bile, and then it's stored in the gallbladder. And if you've tossed the gallbladder in the garbage can, then our liver will continue to create the bile, but now it can't store it for those fattier meals. And bile is literally for breaking up fats, to emulsify fats, so that we can process those better and break them down. So to start to wake up the liver, for lack of a better name, to get it stimulated so that it produces that bile, can be really helpful. So I would say bitters is always your friend, um, but it's only necessary to do HCl if you have the symptoms of low HCl, which can be acid reflux, bloating, pain, difficulty with proteins, a deep stomach crack. That one's harder for anybody who doesn't know. Tongue diagnosis, sorry. Um, and it's important to differentiate if you have a hiatal hernia that may still be caused by low HCl, but it could also be from things like pregnancy, heavy lifting, obesity can also cause a hiatal hernia. It's a structural issue, and less then HCl may not be effective. With most hiatal hernias, it's structural and needs a manipulation to pull the stomach out of your diaphragm, out of your esophagus. And that can be self-done, or you can get fancy and go to a chiropractor, and some acupuncturists know how to do it. They took my class at the Florida State Oriental Medicine Association conference 2 years ago. They know how to do it, hopefully. Or if you interned with me as an acupuncture intern in the last 5 years, I probably showed you. I might not have. It just depends. Got some good questions. They're just showing up at the end here. What else you guys got? Type now. Forever hold your questions until next month. All right. Because I have been drained of a pint of blood sitting here for the last hour and a half, I think I am going to end a few minutes early. This was a crapshoot to see whether it would work. If you don't know, you can see a recording of this at our YouTube channel, Tradition School of Herbal Studies. I'll have it up probably by tomorrow night. I'm not going to do it tonight because it's late and I'm taking away from my camping owl time. And you can also see all the past recordings out there. I will probably do this again next month, even though it's the holidays. Enough of y'all showed up with great questions for us to continue to do this next month. And without a doubt, we'll get onto our normal schedule of life as we go into the new year. You can learn more about the school at traditionsherbschool.com. Yeah, traditionsherbschool.com or acuherbals.com. We got lots of cool classes coming up. Gray, do you have this Thursday? What's your class coming up?
It's about energy, prana.
Oh, you got to say that. I can't say all those words. Come here. Gray's God teaches our Ayurvedic.
The energetic body, the chakras, breath work, pranayama.
Yes, that's that stuff. So she has a lot of cool classes in Ayurvedic medicine. Everybody seems to really enjoy. And then when are we redoing the food one that the hurricanes chased us out of?
It's December 15th.
December 15th is the Ayurvedic cooking and food and make your own ghee and flavored ghees and super yummy. All right, y'all.